Kappel, Rhineland-Palatinate. Kappel is an Ortsgemeinde municipality belonging to a Verbandsgemeinde, a kind of collective municipality in the Rhein-Hunsrück-Kreis district in Rhineland-Palatinate, Germany. It belongs to the Verbandsgemeinde of Kirchberg, whose seat is in the like-named town. Geography. Location. The municipality lies in the Huntsrock on the western boundary of the Verbandsgemeinde of Kirchberg, which here also forms the district boundary between the Rhein-Hunsrück-Kreis and the district of Kappel. The area within the municipality's limits is some 240 ha, of which 340 ha is wooded. Kappel lies at the crossroads of Bundesstraßen 421 and 327, the latter of which is also known as the Hunsrock-Hohenstraße-Hunsrock-Heights Road, a scenic road across the Huntsrock built originally as a military road on Hermann Göring's orders. Kappel lies at the edge of a plateau, which is capped off in the northeast by a knoll of some 525 m above sea level known as the Haystale. Between the flat hollow of the Kiebach brook and a small gully in Morsberg, a long-vanished village towards Kludenbach, this plateau forms a ridge that presents itself especially prominently as a spur at the Church Hill. Beyond the brook, the plateau stretches on farther towards Frankfurt-Hahn Airport. On the horizon, it is marked by the Eidarkopf mountain. Also, it was in the neighborhood of Zellerstrasse Street that water from the local aquifers was first drawn. This laid the groundwork for the settlement that has sprung up here. History. In 1091, Kappel had its first documentary mention in a document from Henry Roman IV, Holy Roman Emperor, in which he donated holdings in the Huntsrock to the High Foundation in Speyer. The place name, the location, and Roman archaeological finds in and around Kappel, however, make it clear that the village must be much older, even if there is no proof of continuous habitation through all that time. In the Middle Ages, the village belonged to the further county of Sponheim. Beginning in 1794, Kappel lay under French rule. In 1814 it was assigned to the Kingdom of Prussia at the Congress of Vienna. Since 1946, it has been part of the then newly founded state of Rhineland-Palatinate. Right near the staggered intersection of Castelloner Strasse and Kirchberger Strasse, a spot known as the Dreyspitz 3-point or tricorn, lies the village center with the old Evangelical Church from 1747 on into the 1950s. The innkeeper was one of the few who still owned horses. Baptist, the farmhand possibly the only one in the village in those days at the homestead zur Krone, now given up as an agricultural concern, but now restored as the municipality's Heimathaus local museum, rode and worked with a horse and a draft ox, while most small farmers did the same with their dairy cows. An evangelical one-room school was built in 1913, after the Gothic Revival Catholic Church had been built nearby in 1898 and 1899. The last Catholic school in the village dated only from the time after the First World War, indeed from 1928, well into Weimar times. Today there are no longer any schools in Kappel. The last one, which was run as an interdenominational primary school, was dissolved on 1 August 1971. The church, which today is evangelical, served from 1688 to 1898 both evangelicals and Catholics under a simultaneum. Before this time, it had long been the preserve of the evangelicals. When the simultaneum was instituted by higher authorities, the minister moved to Woerich, which was wholly evangelical, and ministered to his congregation from there. The relations between denominations were and still are good. When the Catholic Church was being built, many evangelicals donated money for the bells, for which favor they were also wrung out by the Catholic Church when they died. The evangelical congregation, nowadays numbering 232, was autonomous and parochially tied to Leydenegg beginning in 1852, which had its own church, but no rectory. The evangelical minister, who had taken up residence in Kappel once again in 1854, was responsible not only for his local parish, but also for evangelicals in the diaspora, the overwhelmingly Catholic centers stretching down to the Mosel. Since 1976, Kappel has had no evangelical minister and is now parochially tied to Kirchberg. The post of Catholic priest has been vacant since 1981, and the parish was in at first Beburn's hands and is now in Kirchberg's. Until the 1960s, Kappel was still wholly characterized by agriculture. Out of the 111 households here in 1949, 80 were farming households, of which only 8 held lands greater in area than 10 ha. Kappel had then 281 Protestant and 194 Catholic inhabitants. There were also then still a colonial Wirtschaft, a shop that sold colonial, that is, from outside Europe goods such as sugar and coffee in the village center, and another small grocer's shop on what is now called Kirchberger Strasse. The stationer's shop was next to the Catholic school. As well, there were a postal coach station in the lower village on what is now called Zellerstrasse, and a third in on Waldgas Forest Lane. Given the appreciable earnings from forest holdings, a new municipal center, considered quite modern at the time, it had a fire station, a sugar beet syrup kitchen, a storage facility for large pieces of equipment used to steam, freeze, and wash potatoes, and even extra dwelling space upstairs for ethnic German refugees driven out of Germany's former eastern territories after the Second World War. Work on a newer municipal center began in 1965 because the citizens of Kappel and the local clubs wanted a venue big enough for family celebrations and events. A kindergarten was also planned for this new building, but this never came about. The demand for a slaughterhouse was likewise taken into account, and a fully equipped slaughterhouse was integrated into the complex. The building was widely renovated and converted in 1997 and 1998. A kindergarten for 2 groups had been completed in the summer of 1993, an earlier one had been built onto the Evangelical Rectory in the 1950s. Vanished villages. Within Kappel's municipal limits, or at them, is a whole series of former village sites that were forsaken even by the Middle Ages, although their names live on, now applied to the rural cadastral areas that are left where the villages once stood. Kirchweiler, in older sources also called Kerweiler, Morsburg, Rittelhausen, Langerode, Kirchweiler, together with Robach, Worschweiler near Dickenstedt, and Dickenstedt itself, had to contribute to the maintenance of the newly instituted Dickenstedt Favicari, a parish-like body with its own priest beginning in 1317. Politics, six, politics, six, politics, politics. Municipal council, council. The council is made up of 12 council members who were elected by majority vote at the municipal election held on 7 June 2009, and the honorary mayor as chairman. Mayor. Kappel's mayor is Markus Marx. Coat of arms. The German blazon reads, Überblau Gold Gestichtsteltem Schildfuss in silver Einschworzkapel. The municipality's arms might in English heraldic language be described thus: a base countercompany azure, and or above which argent a chapel sable. The base countercompany, that is, with 2 checkered rows, is inspired by the Chequy arms borne by the Counts of Sponheim and refers to the village's former allegiance to the further county of Sponheim. The main charge in these arms, the chapel, is canting for the municipality's name. Chapel is Kapel in German, pronounced somewhat differently from the name Kappel, but still similar. Culture and sightseeing, buildings. The following are listed buildings or sites in Rhineland-Palatinate's Directory of Cultural Monuments: Evangelical Parish Church, Castelloner Strasse 7, Baroque Aeolus Church, marked 1747, see also below. Catholic Parish Church of the Holy Trinity Fagkirch HL, Greifelte Kate, Castelloner Strasse 3, Gothic Revival Hall Church, 1898/1899, architect Eduard Endler, Cologne, see also below. Castelloner Strasse 4, Local History Museum, stately building with hipped mansard roof, timber frame, partly slated, early 19th century, 15th century. Castelloner Strasse 5 Bakehouse, plastered building, partly slated, ground floor hall, marked 1882, the back with half-hipped roof, timber frame 1910/1920D. Castelloner Strasse 17 former Evangelical Rectory, plastered building, marked 1907, see also below. Kirchberger Strasse 7 building with hipped mansard roof, timber framing slated, early 19th century, votive cross, marked 1824. Zeller Strasse 7 timber frame house, 18th or 19th century, stable marked 1881, whole complex of buildings. Zeller Strasse 11 building with hipped mansard roof, timber framing slated, 18th century, whole complex of buildings. Graveyard, east-northeast of Kappel, east of Bundesstrasse 327 basalt, Gothic revival cross. Further information on local buildings and sites. The Evangelical Church's interior decoration is plain in the Reformed tradition, and its original organ from 1900 has been preserved. This came from the Oberlinger brothers' workshop. The 3 bronze bells were poured in 1779 at the Mabelow Bell Foundry in Ehrenbreitstein, now an outlying center of Koblenz. Owing to their historical importance, they managed to escape seizure by the authorities for war requirements in both world wars. The Catholic Church was one of the earliest built by architect Eduard Endler. It has medieval burial reliefs from the former simultaneous church. The 1907 Evangelical Rectory is built in a not very ornate style somewhere between Gründerzeit and Art Nouveau. It has brick framing around the windows, sandstone components, and a representative entrance. It has stood under monumental protection since 1988. The mill stood far downstream from the village, but was nonetheless known as the Kappeler Mühl. It was on the old Waldas Forest Lane where it crossed the Huntsrock-Strasse and used the Kibach as its driving force. It is nowadays under private ownership. Local dialect. The following rhyme serves as an example of the local speech. The local form is at left, followed by Standard High German in the middle with an English translation rightmost. Economy and infrastructure. Transport. The village lies at the crossing of 2 important roads, the road from the Rhine, Koblenz/Boppard to Trier, the one that was later called the Huntsrock-Strasse Bundesstrasse 327, and the road from Köln on the river Nahe by way of Kirchberg to the Mosel and Zell Bundesstrasse 421. The crossing in Kappel is slightly staggered. Both roads are underlain by Old Roman and pre-Roman Celtic roads. When the Huntsrock-Strasse was being upgraded not long before the Second World War, it was realigned by passing the village to the east. Established businesses. The village still has 5 full-time farmers and also 15 more who farm as a secondary source of income. Among the municipality's businesses are a building firm above ground, a fence building firm formerly a wireworks, an artistic glassmaking business, a poultry farm with attached farmer's shop. The municipality's other workers are mainly commuters who work in neighboring towns and municipalities such as Kirchberg, Simmern and Castellon, and at Frankfurt-Hahn Airport. Some commuters even go as far afield as the Frankfurt-Rhine-Main region to the east or Neuwied to the north. Famous people. The most famous Kappeler was the Nachenflicker Pies Nachenflicker, bone mender being a kind of folk medic. The first one, Jacob Pies b. 1860 in Dorweiler, had married into Kappel in 1895. His son Robert Pies 1902-1973 was the last genuine Nachenflicker in Kappel. Both were farmers who, in the tradition of the Huntsrock Pies family, also practiced chiropractic, focusing especially on setting joints right again. The patients came from afar to undergo treatment. From the sometimes painful treatment supposedly came the German word Piesacken, a verb meaning badger, but this is likely folk etymology. The Pies family's history is documented at the Vorderhunsrück Museum in Domershausen.